group today, so you all get to talk 3 times as much as you normally do, so 3 cheers. So first, welcoming introductions. How about we go around? I'm Eric Ellis with Utah Lake Commission. We'll start with Carrie.
Carrie Malkovich with the City of Woodland Hills.
Dave Stroud, Syracuse Springs.
Sullivan of Vineyard City.
Brandon Snyder,
Lyndon.
Juan Garrido, Springfield City.
Rebecca Adams, Provo.
Doug Steyer with Forestry Fire and State Lands.
Randy Nuts, Renewable Energy Innovations.
Randy Zollinger with Houston, now Jacobs.
So is it now in lieu of CH2M, it's now Jacobs?
It is
Simple?
Yeah, well, here in 2 weeks is Jacobs.
I see Jacobs in brackets or vice versa, CH2M. So
We're transitioning.
okay, cool. Lee?
The chairman of the Colorado Springs Owners Association.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here.
Where are all the scientists?
Today's there must be some meetings going on.
Well, they had their meeting for the science panel, and I guess they got more out of it just attending them.
Maybe.
Yeah, Monday.
No, I got a report from Scott Daly that at the last minute he had something else come up that he couldn't miss, so I can give a brief
Oh,
report
I know
on
where
that.
he was.
Where's that? Salt Lake? Great Salt Lake?
The advisory council.
Oh,
I just came from that.
got it. Well, let's make some big important decisions today then, since we have a small group. The first one that we wanted to, and I apologize for, maybe I have it on here somewhere. Let's just talk real quick. Last time we talked about electing a vice chair. Scott Daly his name had come to the ring, as well as Ben Steierman. Laura Alt with Forestry Fire and State Lands nominated Ben, and then sort of unnominated Ben.
She wasn't
Do
happy.
you
She
not
wasn't
want to
happy
be,
with me.
you
I don't.
don't want to be on it?
I don't mind. I have plenty of other too, so I'm fine not to be, but I'm also fine.
So Forestry Fire and State Lands is getting hammered with some big projects that is going to require a lot of their time. And this is what I would propose, and you tell me what you think. We're hoping, and Ben has agreed to help us work through our review of the master plan as an assignment on the committee to kind of help us work through that. And so that will be a pretty time-demanding thing. Scott Daly is running the staffing of the steering committee for the science, or for the Utah Lake Water Quality Study. And so this would be an opportune time for him to have a vice chair role so that he's able to be here regularly and report on how that's moving along. I spoke with Erica Gaddis, his supervisor and the director of Division of Water Quality, and she approved to have him take that role if that's where we would like to go with that. So, any thoughts, comments? Okay. Should we vote on such a thing, or just a small crew? But
Fair enough.
So Ben will help and Scott will be the vice chair.
yeah, and we might, depending on where Ben is next year, we might
Co-vice chairs.
we make it. Well, every year we typically have a chair for a year and a vice chair for a year, and then the vice chair bumps up to chair role. And so we will have an opening next year for a new vice chair, and maybe that would be an opportune time. But in the meantime, we would like to get through the review of this over this coming year, so that portion of the assignment would be done, and we can
Scott's
reopen
not
for
here,
nominations.
but, I mean, he's pretty busy with the water quality study, arm of what's happening. So will he have time to do that also?
He would. So I've talked with him about it. He said he would be happy to do that.
Since
Do we
he's
need
not
a
here.
majority to do this?
Just a quorum.
Yeah, do we have
We need
a quorum?
12?
We probably need 12. So we can hold off on. We're a small enough group today. We probably will just not vote on anything. But could it be our recommendation? Would we be comfortable doing that, recommending that? And at our next meeting, when we have a full house, we can make that final.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. We also have minutes that we won't approve, but did anyone have a chance to look at those and or have any questions or comments or changes to make to the minutes that were on the packet that I sent out? I don't think that we have them attached unless you're in that. See, that I might have sent them out on the second one.
They were in your email.
They were in the email, yeah. No problems with that. Okay. So we'll hold off on approving those till our next meeting. The meeting schedule is point number 3. If everyone can make sure they've got that in their calendars, that would be helpful. If there's any major meetings that we happen to be conflicting with, let's be sure to send those to me, and we can always adjust a meeting time if we need to.
But we're scheduling at 9:30.
We're typically scheduling at 9:30. Today there was the harmful algal bloom call that was from 9 to 10, I think was the timing on that. And so we wanted to make sure that everybody could participate in that as well. But typically, yes, 9:30. And our next meeting will likely still be here as the dredging at the harbor is scheduled to. We're hopeful that it's mid-May, but there's no promises right now, and they've kind of readjusted that time frame to before Memorial Day. So we'll see what happens, but let's plan on meeting here at our next meeting unless you hear otherwise. As far as a report, the permanent wind stations, UDOT, I've mentioned before, UDOT agreed to build, set up the fence, monitor the operations for the wind sensor down at the south end of the lake. That'll be at milepost 17, kind of near Mesita on the west side of the lake. The Lake Commission recently purchased all of the materials for the wind sensor along with some other meters. I forget the name of it, but it's a solar type meter that they were interested in having that data collected as well, and in return they will monitor and maintain that wind station at the American Fork Boat Harbor. So those materials have been purchased. The University of Utah has all the materials in-house now, and they're just planning to schedule a time to come down to the boat harbor to install all of that. And that's run through MesoWest. So they're a wind data collection group that will make that easily available to us so that we can incorporate that into our new web page, not website, but web page that's designed for when you're on the lake. So it'll be a page specifically, it's especially mobile friendly, something that you can pull up when you head down to the lake. It'll give you wind data, temperature of the lake, any of the pertinent information that's going to be helpful for you as a boater and recreational user of the lake.
How big of coverage do you have service in the lake? Is there a...
There's areas where you don't have it, but a pretty good portion of the lake you have coverage, wouldn't you say?
I don't know anywhere where I don't get coverage.
Okay.
When will that happen, Ray?
I'm not sure. So we're working with a group of BYU students, 5 interns that have been running a survey for us. We've got 300 plus responses, 320 some odd responses back that were designed for people to give us feedback on what would be helpful on that one page. And so they're analyzing the responses on that and will help us design that page.
I think it'll be fantastic. And will we then put signage at all of the access points with that?
We could.
Because I think that would be helpful as people put in, they say, oh, if you want to know about these things.
That's a great idea. We are working with Division of Wildlife Resources right now to get some kiosks installed at the various, at least the marinas for now, that will have information about June sucker and information about northern pike, and it'll have room for a variety of things. So that would be a great point. We'll look at getting that installed.
Where's that monitor going to be set up?
The wind sensor,
Yeah.
American Fork Boat Harbor. Okay. The Utah Lake State Park, non-motorized boat access. This is the one, the parking lot just outside of the marina. A lot of work has been done on that. I think it's been, if you call it grubbing, where you remove all the stuff off the surface. Jason Allen, the previous park director or park manager, is still taking a lead role on the completion of that. And so there's been a couple meetings with the county on getting the next steps of that completed. We still have our portion, the commission's portion of funds to go into that. As soon as they've got billables for $15,000, we can reimburse that portion of it. There's not enough funding to complete it to asphalt finish right now with the restrooms, but they're pretty confident that they can get a good chunk of the work done and have it pretty usable, likely a gravel type finish that they can make it a usable parking lot until they get that final finish done. Forestry, Fire, and State Lands still has a little bit of the grant from 3 years ago now that we've worked with Jason Allen to collect all of the in-kind and actual expenses that have gone into the project, and they'll be able to get reimbursed for up to about $30,000 that remains in that grant. And so, again, a big chunk of it should be done. The Utah Mitigation Commission is being a good partner on that. The county, Provo City, has been approached, and it sounds like they're going to be helpful on getting that done. It'll be a huge perk to the city because it's outside of the park. There's no fee associated with it. It cleans up that corner where all the
Will it be ready
folks.
to showcase at the Lake Festival?
Some portion of it would, and in fact, we're hopeful that it'll at least be covered with a hard enough surface that folks can park on it, because the dredging project, Campground Loop A, which is currently the location for all of the dredge material, because of that additional funding, they got an additional $500,000 to carve 2 feet out of a priority area, 2 additional feet. There's not enough room in that loop that they designated and bermed off for all the material, and so they're going to be staging, if you will, a portion of that dredge material on one of the parking lots. It can't be very deep because it'll damage the asphalt if it goes too deep, but one of those parking lots is not going to be available during the festival, so that's why we're hoping that parking lot out there, it's a good 85 to 100 spots. I can't remember what they landed on, but
Are they waiting for that mud to dry before they go away, though?
Yeah.
Bunnies?
well, the majority of the fill in the campground loop will actually stay there, and it'll be a raised campground, which is genius. It's too bad we couldn't have staged the dredging so that we could fill the entire campground and raise the whole thing up, because that'll be the sought after loop, because you'll actually have a view of the lake from there. Right now, if there's even a tiny bit of growth of Phragmites or vegetation on the shoreline, and the lake's not full, you can't even see the lake very well. So
The campground's also been underwater a couple times.
it has. So it'll be good. Maybe future dredging we can once that loop gets hardened and built up as a usable resource, maybe we can fill some of the others and raise them up. Okay, restoration proposals. Lake Restoration Solutions, Inc. The update that we have from them is that HB 272 passed through the legislative session. HB 272 simply provides additional language to Forestry, Fire, and State Lands for the exchange of land for service, and it establishes criteria for what that exchange would look like. So because it's a service, it would need to follow, you know, a whole long list of restoration type activities.
That was
And-
HB 272.
It is. And lastly, it creates one more additional oversight mechanism for reviewing a future proposal or the proposal at hand. And so that would go before the Legislative Management Committee, a group that oversees and reviews all kinds of activities through the state. If you read through their document, they kind of have a role in things, just about everything in the state. So that'll be Forestry, Fire, and State Lands had the capacity to review and approve proposals of that nature already. It just wasn't as clear as the language that they now have. So they're perfectly fine with the additional oversight. It gives an elected body the opportunity to review a proposal that they will also be on the line as the regulatory agency on reviewing and going through their entire process on that as well. So it just adds an extra round of review that will make sure that project doesn't move ahead unless it is done right.
This is moving ahead somewhat.
So right now, the project by Lake Restoration Solutions Inc. is the proposal, from what I'm told, is close to being accepted, which simply means
By who?
by Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, which doesn't approve the project. It simply accepts their proposal with a list of conditions, and among that long list of conditions is a federal EIS, and all of the regulatory agencies that have an interest in the lake. So Forestry, Fire, and State, or sorry, they're the ones doing this. U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, UDOT, Army Corps of Engineers. Are there any others? Those are the main ones. Will need to be a part of that EIS and issue permits at the end of it, or at some time during that permitting process or EIS process for the items that are proposed. In addition to that, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands has a long list of questions that they'll need more information on that will need to be studied. And so really the acceptance of that proposal simply puts them into fleshing out their proposal into more finite detail and into that EIS process, which will be a number of years long. And we have Randy here, so I'll ask Randy from Renewable Energy Innovations to give us a little bit of an update on projects happening on the lake.
We received tentative approval to go forward with an aeration project that will do aeration into all the marinas. We've gotten approval from almost every marina operator to go forward and do that. So we're just in that final permitting process with soccer plans.
Can you tell us what the aeration project means?
It means that we'll be putting aeration into the marinas that will help clarify the water, help to mitigate, keep out as much as possible any of the algae blooms. But it's really to give a better public perception of the lake when they approach there and as they go into those marinas. But it's also part of a BYU study, so we asked BYU to come in and do a water study in those marinas as the aeration happens, and they've agreed to do that.
So the aeration is an ongoing process, not just a one-time
Yep.
event.
Yeah, we may elect to shut off in the winter time, but if the aeration stays going in the winter, there would either be no ice, in the marinas. But that decision's not yet been made.
Is this subsurface, or is it going to have fountains?
It's subsurface, no fountains, no. Yeah. The aerators sit on the diffusers sit on the bottom of the marina. And then there'll be buoys over them, so make sure that there's no accidents or when it drops to low tides. There's no cost to the cities or the marina operators or to the state. In addition to that, just want to report, we had our pre-treatment green waste demonstrations at BYU over the last 2 weeks, and we had a good group both times, and I think all were well educated with some of the new things that are coming out, the new technologies that are available through the pre-treatment process. As a result of that meeting, we have a number of both in Utah County, Salt Lake County, and Davis County, wastewater treatment plants or cities that want to do this green waste processing. And we're right now evaluating each of those opportunities to see which one that we'll actually go forward with. A couple of them are nice because they're available digesters that we can plug right into to scale and demonstrate that at a commercial level. And there's significant interest in that to be that pilot facility. So we're evaluating those now. Lastly, we're in escrow on property that sits right next to TSSD, 100 acres, to actually begin our first plant and our first green waste operation on a private basis. So that's just a quick update of where we're at and what we're doing.
And could you just describe real briefly what that green waste, what the innovation is behind the green waste solution?
BYU has developed a biological process that breaks down cellulistic material in ways we've not been able to do in the past. There's a hard shell that's around your cellulistic material that's been next to impossible to break, and it means that most of our wastewater treatment plants or waste operations that try to digest green waste can't do it, and it ends up having to flush it out of the systems, and ends up going to either compost or landfill. This technology is significant because it breaks down that cellulosic material and turns green waste into a kind of looks like green tea in about 48 hours. It's very fast. This allows us then to put it into a conventional digester, improve gas quality, and a number of other things that we learned in that demonstration. So they've been doing it in lab scale for over a year, and now we're ready to move up to pilot scale and commercialization. So what it does is it allows us to treat green waste, save the city's money because they don't have to take it out to landfill, extends the life of the landfill because we're not putting that in ground, and actually provides several commodities that help pay for that, so it doesn't cost the cities to get rid of green waste. So there's a number of benefits to the cities.
Are cities having the opportunity to see this proposal or to see this demonstration that you're talking about?
Well, we had 2 demonstrations, and I think the word got out to as many people as we could.
Most of the POTWs had representatives
Yeah.
at those showings.
And a number of
We probably
cities.
didn't get invited, we don't know.
Where does your water get treated? Are you Spanish?
TSSD was there.
Wastewater, they have lost.
But no, so you're Woodland Hills, so you're what, Spanish Fork?
Jason,
Payson?
Mason.
Did Payson have a,
Mason was invited, yeah.
yeah.
And I have talked to
okay.
the Payson mayor, so he's aware of the technology. He was on, I didn't see anybody from Payson at the demonstration.
One of the other nice things about it is if it gets built up and we have a couple of plants around the valley, they can bring all the green waste that can be gathered and process all of that, because they'll have a motivation to get all that they can. And so as cities, they'll have the opportunity to encourage green waste to come in and do cleanups and that type of thing, and have a place to put it at standard tipping fees or free if it goes directly to one of these plants. So
One other advantage that you might be interested in is the odor control. Because that's done in 48 hours, and then when it's put into a digester, that's complete in 5 days. We don't have 3 months of compost piles and odors associated with that many of the cities are having to deal with. So that goes away.
thank you. Any other questions? Okay, research funding. This group is going to have an opportunity. We talked about research funds in the past and whether we were interested or not. Well, it has landed in our lap. A request was made by you may be familiar with the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council. Leland Myers is the executive director of that group, and a number of the cities in Utah Valley are members of that. They made a legislative request to supplement the funding going into the Utah Lake Water Quality Study, and asked that those funds be directed through the Utah Lake Commission. And so that's $500,000 to go towards research. The Division of Water Quality has $1 million for that. The Wasatch Front Water Quality Council also has, what's their annual budget? $600,000 or something like that. That will go into it, and this will be yet another portion, and they would like this group to evaluate. We'll attempt to align the steering committee and science panel that's already formed to kind of help us on those projects.
So how
And
much of the appropriations actually, just did you say 500,000?
500,000.
That's what, that will go through Lake Commission. Out of
Correct.
all the appropriations that are given to the lake.
That will be directed specifically for research. Yeah, so keep that in mind. That'll become available on July 1st, and we'll have the coming year to assign that. The science panel, are we going to talk about that? Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. But keep that in mind, and we'll be using this body to make the decisions on where those funds are used. The Wasatch Front Water Quality Council will also be likely sending representatives to this group to also kind of make proposals and that type of thing to kind of keep those funds headed where they should. But that's pretty exciting.
So we have one bill that was directly related to the lake, and then this appropriations, then other appropriations for other agencies that work around with the lake also.
Correct. And those other funds, so the $1 million for the Division of Water Quality, that was appropriated by the Water Quality Board, a year and a half, almost 2 years ago?
It was a one-time thing.
One-time thing. And so that's in place. There was $130,000 in this year's appropriations that went to the Division of Water Quality as well, that will lend itself to this program, but it won't be directly to research. It will be to the peer review and some other specifics that I wish we had Scott here to talk to better, because I wasn't as familiar with that one. As far as I know, Ben, could you confirm that the $50,000 appropriation for the Marsh Masters get finalized? Do we know?
That's what I was wondering, is that for the fragmite
So that's separate.
and the carp, those are separate appropriations.
Correct. And there's no appropriation made for carp this year. The last appropriation that was intended to happen took place last year. And that was somewhere around $400,000, I think. And those funds, along with the federal funds that the June Sucker program uses, will last until the end of a year from now, summer. And between now and then, in April, USU is completing their carp density study, and along with that study, they will bring back recommendations on what level of maintenance needs to take place with carp going forward. And with those recommendations, the June Sucker program, their governing board, so to speak, will make a determination on what kind of solutions they have to stay on top of it going forward. There's a number of technologies. There's dotterless carp. There's the carp herpes. There's the potential for doing some sort of co-fishing where they would harvest something that was sellable, like catfish, and harvest carp at the same time and maybe stay on top of it that way. And so they'll be evaluating those options once that report gets back from USU towards the end of April.
So everybody goes forward with their plans in research or in all these other areas appropriation. And then we have the bill, the 272 for restoration. And then we have the restoration project over here, and somewhere they all collide in the future, but everyone just kind of goes forward in their own way, and when we get to that point, then
There's a lot of collaboration happening. So I participate in the June Sucker program meetings. They're both their technical and their administrative meetings, and they're aware of what we're doing because Mike Mills comes to these meetings typically. The steering committee, that's a result of Division of Water Quality's Utah Lake Water Quality Study that I co-chair. That has, I think, 6 members of the governing board or its representatives represented there, and so and Wasatch Front Water Quality Council also has a number of folks. Juan is a member of that, and a few others that typically attend these meetings. The TSSD is a member of that, and so while there's lots of efforts going on from a variety of different locations, there is also a lot of overlap between each of those groups so that there is not redundancy in the research being done.
that's what I was getting to, yeah. Okay.
And in fact, not only is there very little redundancy, there's also a pretty concerted effort to collaborate on what needs to be done
So funding is
and who can fund that because of various different constraints on the different entities. Some can fund this and some can't, and so they divide and conquer on that regard. And that has been growing more and more collaborative in recent years as the Wasatch Front Water Quality Council is in the process of signing an MOU with the Division of Water Quality. Historically, they were a little more butting heads, and now they're very much more working to kind of align their interests more through a common goal.
Yes.
Yeah.
With this funding, Eric, all the cities that are members of the Utah Lake Commission, they pay some kind of due towards the commission.
Yep.
Is there going to be an increase on that fee to help with more funding, or what we are paying, is that sufficient to keep us?
Well,
have we
yeah.
any-
This year, the budget proposal has a 3% increase to municipalities, and largely that just keeps us exactly where we were because one city pulled out last year. Mapleton pulled out.
We did Mapleton?
Mapleton. And
Hold out?
yeah, unbeknownst to me, I heard it through the aftermath of a council meeting that they said we'd like to pull out. So that's unfortunate. We had a couple discussions. Technically, they were a member for the remainder of the year, but we have not had I've invited the mayor on multiple occasions to come to some of our meetings and or a representative of their choice, since they still are a member, because they let us know after the fiscal year had begun.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're still a paying member for this fiscal year that we're in, but didn't have an opportunity or elected to not participate anymore. So anybody that is friends with them and can do some encouragement, that would be helpful. And so yeah, so the addition of that $500,000 does not cost us more. There's an administrative portion of that with any of those types of appropriations that can cover any additional costs. So having that come through the commission will bump us into a need for an external audit, and the funds for that will come from those dollars as well. I did get a chance to speak with the executive committee about technical committee direction, and they are very supportive of us going through and doing the review of the master plan, and asked that we work with Laura and Ben and Brian Cottam with Sovereign Lands to determine if there's any portions of the Lakes Restoration Solutions Inc.'s proposal that we might potentially do some studies on or assist with the EIS process or something along those lines. But we don't have direction from Sovereign Lands yet on that. They would like us to kind of sit down and talk about it and figure out if there's some areas where we can help with that. For now, they're going through their processes, which are very thorough, and we'll just see how we might be able to lend a hand on that.
Eric, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
On the cheap seats, hate to say much, but there was an editorial, I haven't read it myself, and it is reviews of the opioid professor for
Mr. Abbott and Mr. Carling.
And I think it may, at least I've heard it kind of captured maybe some concerns about the Utah Lake restoration proposal and maybe what some views maybe somewhat of an overreach or an overdevelopment of the lake. And I think I'm getting to my question. My question is there a public component to a master plan where you're reaching out and getting public input as to what Utah County folks really envision for the lake? What is the lake? The folks really is it more of a developed lake like Utah Lake restoration? Is it something less? I don't know. And I don't know if that gets captured by the technical committees.
So I'll answer one part of that, and then I'll have Ben answer another part of that. The review that we are going to do as a technical committee over the remainder of the year will be a public setting, so the public are more than welcome to join these meetings. But this is much more of a advisory recommendation group, as is the Utah Lake Commission. And so we are going to find feedback for this, and then next year it will switch into the official guided Utah Lake Management Plan with a consultant. And tell us about that process.
Yeah, we just finished the Jordan River CMP last year, and there's a lot of public involvement. We hold stakeholder meetings that are essentially, if you're a landowner around the lake, you get invited. All of the cities have public notices, so anybody who's has anything at stake with the lake is typically notified, and we usually run notices in the paper and things to let people know. But that's typically the public involvement aspect of these, and we'll do the same thing when we redo the master plan for Utah Lake. And then as far as like the direction of whether or not the lake is, should be developed and things that we don't usually identify that specific in our master plan, but we do identify things like we classify the lake, and we kind of did that in the last plan, but it was pretty broad and not so specific. If you go on to like our Jordan River master plan, we have a story map that can kind of walk you through how we classified the river. And I would imagine we would probably want to do something similar with Utah Lake, where if there's already development, we would identify that as an area that we could continue to develop. If there's an area where it's we're trying to preserve the natural ecosystem, then we would obviously try to protect that from development. So I think that would be part of the public process in classifying that. But everything that we do, we typically try to involve the public as much as possible until we get the feedback and we're able to compile that into the final plan. And then it does go out. The final plan also goes out for several review periods, consistency reviews, where other agencies and even the public also has a chance to comment on that. So, so there's several points of.
And the proposal itself, as we mentioned earlier, Forestry, Fire, and State Lands has as a mandatory 2 45-day public comment periods as they go through the permitting side of that type of plan. And hopefully between now and the adoption of a new master plan, and between now and the adoption or permit of a potential Utah Lake Restoration Solutions, Inc. Utah Lake Restoration, I forget the name. Lake Restoration Solutions, Inc. Between now and the permit of theirs, it'll also provide folks an opportunity to dive in and really understand what that proposal is. The group that wrote the op-ed hadn't actually read the proposal, which makes it difficult to come to the table with someone about an issue when they don't take the time to know what they're writing about. And so there will be a lot of opportunity for folks to understand what is being proposed and what isn't being proposed, and then take a stance on what is being proposed, which will be a helpful point to start that discussion. Thank you, Ben. And good question. Okay, so Ben, do you want to walk us through and
So Eric asked me today to walk through these, so I wasn't totally prepared. I've read this several times, but wasn't prepared to walk through the whole thing. But through reading this section that it was that we were asked to review, in my opinion, most of this is pretty broad language and policies. It's not so direct, so I didn't have very many changes that I felt were necessary, but I wanted to make sure we capture anybody's comments, or if anybody else had changes. Did anybody have a chance to read through this? Is everybody kind of, yeah, okay. Well, we can just go through, I'm not going to read the whole thing, obviously, but I'll just come through to each bullet point here, and if you guys have comments or suggestions, I'll make notes, and then I can kind of maintain those records for those notes for when we do the start working on the master plan. So, as far as the executive summary goes, did anybody have any comments or suggestions for changes in?
what is needed to change it to be more of a management plan rather than a master plan?
So the master plan doesn't have any sort of, we don't have any obligation to use this as a management plan. A management plan, we create the management plan in order to help guide our management decisions. So, for example, I keep on going back to the Jordan River because I think that was a really well thought out plan, but we've classified the river in a sense to where we have allowable and potentially allowable uses, and it requires different levels of planning and site planning. Randy was actually involved in another project, I think, with the sewer line, right? Randy, in Salt Lake? Yeah. So that directly affected your project with the management plan on what they could and couldn't do. So that guides our management. This is more of like a guideline, so we don't have any responsibility to use this for our management.
Okay, so we'll keep the master plan as the plan, and then each organization has their own management plan, but we will also have a management plan.
This will
on
be
the
in lieu of
management plan. So we try to capture.
This will be our management plan and our master plan.
Yeah. So this was. I wasn't around when this was made, but this was. This is much. The master plan doesn't. It actually, in my experience with it, it doesn't actually identify. Identify the management of the lake. It's more like guidelines about like how, like you can, anything in here that you read as far as like general policies and other things, it's like language like encourages.
So we're going to keep it as a master plan, but change the wording so that it also becomes a management plan.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. I think we would kind of adopt this more into an actual management plan. Is
So the new version would be a management plan that replaces the previous master plan.
And my suggestion so far, changing language, which I think would be obvious, but instead of using words like encourages, we would have more kind of solidify that language to be, can or won't.
So just to clarify, the Jordan River Commission is a partner on that management plan, much like we are a partner on your management plan, what might become a management plan. And as such, although we are an advisory body, you are a regulatory body, and you combine the two, and so the enforcement side of the management plan would come through your shop, whereas the overall comprehensive nature of the plan is how we participate in that. Is that sort of right?
That seems about right. I think you captured that.
Because originally, I think that the reason why this might have been as non-committal was because Utah Lake Commission was formed as a we don't have authority, regulatory authority, we're an advisory body, but that's apparently you guys have worked through that, and that's okay to have
Well, we need to update we're mandated to have a management plan for every water body that we own. So we've gone through and started to do that we're currently doing the Green and Colorado River management plans. And we just finished the Bear River management plan and the Jordan River management plan, and we're mandated also to go through and update those every 10 years. And it's kind of like a city's, planning documents where they go through and update them. There may be some changes that aren't substantial, but we still need to review them and go through. This one, I think, will be this master plan as a guiding document for how we would create a management plan. And so we would use a lot of the information and policies and things I think would remain the same, but there will be some more committal language that would
Okay.
be more.
So if this proposal goes through, where they basically turn the Utah Lake over to this restoration company, does all this become null and void?
That is a good question. I think that's part of the internal review that we would do right now, and I think that this would be I think reviewing this right now is a really good opportunity for us to identify how some of these policies and things align with their proposal. I don't think we can necessarily relate the islands, but maybe just identify some of the policies that we think that could contradict. But I think that would change the master plan a lot.
Would there still be any oversight to that group?
Absolutely. I don't think that as far as the land exchange goes, that's the part that kind of gets a little more technical now that the legislative group has the committee that will have this oversight committee. We still have input on this, but the decision to approve this somewhat comes out of our hands as far as saying, absolutely yes or no. So I think that this is going to be, we would have a lot of oversight on that and contribute our ideas and everything. But as far as
The
what happens
the
on
only
it.
thing technically that gets handed over, so to speak, is an exchange of land.
Say,
In,
once the exchange is done, that island we would have nothing to do with after that. We would be the original the ordinary high water mark or wherever the boundary is settled for the exchange. So what happens on the island after the project would happen would be out of our hands. But like the dredging, all of that stuff would be, we would have to permit those activities just like we would if someone wanted to dredge their marina. So there would be a lot of permitting, a lot of red tape to go through just to get to the point where the islands were built. But after the islands would be private property. And then the restoration of the shoreline, as I understand it, would still, obviously that would still be fall into our lap, and we would be permitting that and have oversight onto that. But this is so new as well. We've never dealt with a land exchange like this ever. So we're still kind of working through the kinks and just trying to find out if it's even legal and what would happen with that. So Eric probably knows a lot more about the land exchange than I do. So that's it.
but yeah, it'll be a long, methodical process to before we ever get to any kind of exchange. So with lots of oversight, not just from Forestry Farm State Lands, but also these other agencies that have a say on the fish in the lake and water and roads. So yeah, I bet there will be few things approached as non-hastily as this one will be. So there's been a lot of perception that it's all of a sudden it's there and it's happening and whether we like it or not, but that is not the case. There has been some steps taken that have been completed, but those are just steps in a long uphill line of processes that are necessary to allow such a thing to happen or to not happen.
And I'm sure you guys have all worked with the Army Corps, so I think once they get to that point,
Yep.
things will certainly get more
Who
complex.
moves faster, the Army Corps or the Pacific?
Oh man, that's a good question, but I think that'll be pretty telling as well. Once the Army Corps is involved, I think we'll see really quickly how feasible everything is.
Okay, sorry for the detour.
No, that's great. So So that could change things, and I think hopefully in a year, when we're looking at doing the master plan, we'll have a lot of these questions answered, and maybe that'll help guide where we're at. But it also, if we don't have those questions answered, it might be something we have to wait to amend to create the master, or the management plan.
So, just in looking at this document and the difference between a master plan and a management plan, when we're talking about the differences between what the commission encourages or hopes and what you will or can and can't do.
Sure.
There are some boundaries and some kind of fine lines in how that's set up. How do we kind of navigate that?
So I think going through this now is just a good chance to kind of provide some comments, and since we kind of have this as a guiding document in the first place, if we can give some guidance, like if we don't like how these policies are laid out, like if there's some in there to talk about, we will look for further studies for water quality and how these nutrients affect the beneficial uses of the lake, or isn't there, like, and if you thought that shouldn't be in our plan, then we would look at that and say, okay, we don't need to put that in our management plan. But as far as the, this is guidance, whereas the management plan would have a little more teeth to it. It confuses me a little bit too when I get down to the bare bones of it, but this is literally like a guidance document. There's nothing in here that I think is substantial to guide our decisions. For management, it's more of literally just guidance. Is that how you would perceive the plan right now? I mean, we certainly use this to help guide.
So this is more our opportunity as the commission to direct and provide feedback on what the management plan that is enforced by the Sovereign Lands Office will look like. And we can adopt it as our master plan, not as the enforcement authority, but as the partner to Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. Do you have thoughts on that?
I'm just trying to navigate that line between, if the document's supposed to be, the way that it's explained in the executive summary uses both, then it seems complicated to use it as both when one is more of a guidance document and the other is management plan.
Would you keep would the master plan go away once the management plan?
I don't know.
Because it almost seems like you almost want to have a master plan for the Utah Lake Commission and then a management plan based on that document.
And that might be the end result.
And you have two separate documents that say, okay, based on this document, we're going to create this management plan.
I think that makes sense. I mean,
and reference it, but to have one document that exists as both is complicated.
Because I agree with that. I think that you can't have one that exists as both. I think the management plan is going to be more of it's going to be more committal, and it's going to have more of our actual management authority into that plan. Whereas this, maybe we can remove really all of the language that talks about FFSL's adoption of the master plan.
I kind of want to just nix that second paragraph or say, that or just have that go into a separate document or talk about that being a separate document that is based on, this document is intended to be a base document for a management plan that will be separately created.
Well, I think one of the shortcomings of this document is that it was intended to be adopted by Forestry, Fire, and State Lands as a management plan, but it doesn't identify the management objectives as clearly as it should. So I think that's the problem with this document. So by editing the document to have more teeth in it, like you could change it and call it the Utah Lake Management Plan and edit this to be less of a master plan with the broadened blanket language and have more committal language. So if you, it just depends on if you want to have, I guess, 2 documents, but I think having 2 documents might be confusing.
What I would envision is a more succinct vision document that becomes our master plan. That doesn't have as many specifics like this, that guides the management plan of the lake. And so the Utah Lake Commission can retain a master plan, so kind of a vision for the lake with some, detailed vision statements and so forth. And then it complements the actual management plan that Forestry Fire and State Lands comes in. But I would say that for now, we work through this and figure out, identify issues that we may have with it, identify things that are missing, and then as we switch into the actual restructuring of this document with a consultant on board, we narrow in on what we want to see at the end of the process. For now, it's more evaluating what we have on our existing master plan.
And I think if everybody would commit to reading the document before we come and having comments on it, it would move through really quickly and we could.
Would you like us to email you our comments beforehand?
That'd be great. If you want to email me comments beforehand, I can compile comments and we can go through and I can basically say, Woodland Hills said this about, this section and people can discuss that. That'd be fine.
What is your email?
It's B. Styreman, it's STIREMAN at utah.gov. And so Sam had sent out the sections of the master plan in his last meeting, lining up the meetings for the year. Maybe Sam can give people a reminder and send out the section we're supposed to read as we come close to them, just to kind of give everybody.
And they are labeled by the month of the meeting, so
I think maybe
that'll help. But we will definitely send out a reminder.
Everybody's mind, that would be great. And then really, this is they're only like 8 or 9 pages, so I think it's like a 10-minute read for most people to go through it.
Let me make sure I got this right. BSTIRMAN.
EMAN, like fireman.
Oh,
That's
not MAN, MEN.
MAN. It's EMAN.
STIRE.
Probably be better to put an email saying, members, please review this.
And I'll send out that email again in the reminder, and we'll send that out this week, reminding everybody of what we're going to be looking at next May.
Just on the general policies that I've been reading through, a lot of these are already covered through stormwater programs, through wastewater standards.
Yeah, I didn't
and
make
all
it clear.
things like that.
That's why I think these are so broad that they didn't have that much influence. So
Now, one thing that I think a lot of the members are lacking is more education of what we're trying to accomplish with the lake. So I think if you guys can be the liaison between everything we want to accomplish with the city, but then also trying to, you're kind of taking into consideration what other federal and state laws are there. And because sometimes I make a call to Department of Natural Resources, Wildlife, and
sure.
I don't ever get a call.
They're not. Yeah, I understand. That makes sense. I think that makes a good point. And if anybody also wanted to see what another management plan looked like, you're more than welcome to go to forestry.utah.gov and look at like any of our plans, specifically, like I said, the Jordan River plan might be helpful just to give an idea of what our other plans are. Yeah. There too.
Yeah, that
Or
would be
just send it
helpful
to
to us
Yeah.
to send out either the link or just the.
Yeah, and we have there's also something like that I really like about our plans. We have an interactive map that you can look at the way the river's classified, and we can do the similar types of things with the lake to have, so someone can easily go in and look and say, oh, this is, this is preserved, or this is an area where more development is allowable, like vineyard to put in their beach or something like that. Like, there's just
Well, and Utah Lake already has certain management requirements as far as, it's already got a management plan set up for water rights and, so forth like that. And it's already got, I think the Well, like there's a pretty specific, like there's the Utah Lake Compromise that says specifically how it's supposed to be managed, and then there's this huge agreement that says this is how.
So there's a big
certain things are
difference
supposed
too,
to be
with
said.
our management authority versus like water rights. They manage the actual water rights. They have nothing to do
Right.
with any of the land use. So if you know, like your point of diversion for water, that would involve us, because how you're crossing the land, or if you're discharging, that's like water rights is such a specific category for that. And we identify some of those objectives for water rights within our plan, I think, is a little more broadly, but I don't think that they could encompass land use like we would in our plan. And I don't think they do.
Right, but I'm just saying, there are certain, like, there's, you know,
Wasn't
one
there
that
a
it seems like
shoreline
it's called like the
development
Utah Lake
agreement that all the cities had to
Management
sign?
Plan or something like that, it's like specifically what it's called or something like
Yeah,
that.
if there's something like that, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah.
But
There was a lawsuit that established the compromise line, the latest
Well,
compromise.
This was just a few years ago. There was a development agreement basically protecting developments or types of developments along the shorelines of Utah Lake that all the member cities had to sign and went through their councils and stuff just a few years ago.
There was a model ordinance that was created at some level through the commission, and a couple cities adopted that or adapted that and adopted it, the adaption. But not all cities. There was no requirement. It was simply presented to all the cities as a model ordinance, and American Fork for sure adopted it. Saratoga Springs recently used it as a bit of a model as they developed their own version of it, and Vineyard adopted something like it as well.
And another thing as well is there's so many regulatory authorities on Utah Lake. Like we can't encompass everybody's management authority or rules into our management plan, or it'd be a useless document because it'd be like 1,000 pages long.
Oh, yeah.
So this is literally like what I would consider like a land use planning document. Like it manages the land use more than like we don't identify any of the Army Corps policies because they're so complex that you have a manual just based on their policies. So we would defer to the Army Corps, in certain situations. You'd say, like, in this instance, if you're determining, like, there's these other agencies you're going to need your permits through these agencies, and I think that's helpful for you. When you call natural resources, we may have a sister division in natural resources, so you also need a permit through it, but that's not our responsibility to issue that permit. And I know that creates several layers, but that's just the nature of.
The main thing is knowing what we even talked about getting.
And I think this would outline it. Like it would allow to.
I would like to have something there because Provo as well as Spanish Fork and Springville, we have our effluent channels going through.
Sure.
And that's a constant maintenance issue because it's not just effluent from the sewer plants, it's also a lot of stormwater. And as they get all plugged up with sediment, just for me to try to.
So like if you needed to dredge it, you would contact. And I agree, that's great. And I think that's something that this could help identify. Like this management or this master plan talks about, it has a table that talks about agencies and their responsibilities and their legal authority. I think this is really helpful for people because they can reference this, but it's not as specific as like if I need to maintain or if I need to do this dredging project, who do I need authority from? So I think you could have some kind of flow chart, like if you're disturbing soil, this, yes or no. If yes, contact these agencies and go on from there. And I think that's a great idea because I do think that that's a shortcoming that people often, sometimes we don't get contacted until the project started and then we have to deal with it that way. And sometimes that happens in the Army Corps. I try to let people know what permits they need as far as I know, but I think we could do a better job about, encompassing all of our interests.
Well, and how to set up kind of a long-term maintenance, project and
Yeah.
to
Well,
keep things taken care of.
just out of
over time.
One thing to consider is like your effluent channels. I don't know that I have those permitted on state lands as it stands. So a lot of those things on Utah Lake, we got this land, like Sitley used to manage these, and there was a term where, or a period where people weren't actively managing sovereign lands. It was like the state owned it, and there wasn't a lot of management. And the commission was formed. I mean, there's a lot of developments happened, and now we have people on the ground actively managing, but there's projects like effluent channels that exist that weren't permitted. Currently, if we permit something like that, we build that into the lake. It's like you have this permit for 30 years, and your maintenance is included in that permit. So your permit's good with us, but you now need to get your, like if you're going to dredge, you need to speak with Army Corps and get your permit, or a letter that says you don't need a permit based on how you're doing that. That would be, a little more clear that way. So some of these uses might bring to light, like, oh, we need to get some of these uses permitted, and then it will be a little more clear on who you need to contact. So that would be kind of the simple answer, I guess. The not so simple answer.
Well,
so there's nothing.
That's something that we could probably work on in the interim before we have a new plan put together as a flow chart, a regulatory flow chart with some general or as specific of contacts as we can pull together at this point in time. It'll always be changing, of course, if we get too specific, but it'll be helpful and we can stay on top of it as best we can.
So yeah, I think it would be valuable though if everybody had a minute to check out that other plan, and I'll send everyone so you can distribute that. And then if you think that that's not the way you want to see this go, then we should have another discussion about the master plan versus the management plan and how those two documents would work together or not exist at all. Right?
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
fair. All right. So does anybody? We probably don't even need to go through each subsection unless anybody has any comments or anything on the whole entire. And I don't want to waste everybody's time by.
One thing on the voting members, Salem isn't in there.
Okay. So yeah, I think all of those.
Also, did we add Timpanogos, or are we going to add Timpanogos?
That we're going to review that. Thanks for being here. We'll review that for our upcoming governing board meeting.
So I think we would need to update the voting
Interlocal.
members, obviously, because
Yeah.
that's changed
And
since
if Nathan
2009.
is out, then we probably need to get them out.
Yeah, I
There's a
think
few.
that,
There's a few changes to that one actually.
We need to-
Yeah, I agree. So we'll update voting members and ex officio members and any of that.
And the ex officio members, by the way, are only ex officio for a year. They just get it was built in that cities that wanted to kind of get a feel for what it was could come for a year, see what it was all about, and it was a way to kind of get them interested. So anybody that was there once upon a time is either now a member like Payson, but not Eagle Mountain City is not an ex officio or a member right now. So.
That would all have to be updated. The one comment I had about the map that's on the last page is that this map encompasses more than what we would do on our management plan because we only manage to the settled boundaries. So I think if you look at, like, go to the classifications of the lake later
Yep.
in the document, it only identifies the land that we would be working on the management plan for. So a lot of this is a little more broad than what we would be.
A study area.
Exactly. We're not going to be making any management decisions for like the city.
Could we
or
distinguish
schools.
that? Could we say here was the study area, here's the management area? Just show it on.
The pink line on this map.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the boundary.
And we're still settling boundaries on Utah Lake, so that all would change to be the most updated boundary that we have. And I think there's just 2 or 3 left that we're working on, but yeah, that's the area that we would identify as like state sovereign lands and making the management. If this is the area that you want to have as like an area of study, I guess that affects, like stormwater collection and other waste discharge and things like that. Is that kind of the purpose?
I think
of-
that's probably what the purpose was of having it a little bit larger.
So we'd have to decide, like, are we going to identify any guidance in that area? Because if not, I don't know if it makes sense to have
Yeah.
that all there.
Clear out in the road.
Yeah, and it also encompasses like all, you know, a big chunk of American Fork and a big chunk of Saratoga and that.
We could revisit that. Maybe we reduce that down to the boundaries of the sovereign land.
That might be desirable on our end.
Okay.
Those are mainly my comments. Does anybody have, like I said, I don't want to waste everybody's time by going through every section unless everybody had a chance to kind of read those and wants to comment or whatnot.
As part of the email that we send out this week regarding the next meeting, I'll also encourage folks to revisit this first section and provide any comments that they would like on this first section as well.
And you'll send us the plan to compare and then also get an email.
Correct. Okay. Well, we'll move on. Thank you for that. The Water Quality Steering Committee structure update. We talked a little bit about that. The science panel should be seated by the next meeting. We'll have 3 alternate makeups of that science panel. There will be a 5 to 7 member group as one proposal, and 1 or 2 groups that are made up of more or less 5 and 5. The first group is a mix of fully independent, what's the term? Starts with the C. Conflicted, non-conflicted scientists. So they have no connection to the steering committee, and they're not planning to bid on any of the projects that will be done on the lake. And then some that have conflicts because they're employed by a member of the steering committee, or they do plan to bid on potential projects, research projects on the lake. So the first group could be a mix of those. The next would be 5 and 5, 5 totally independent, and 5, you know, one of the goals right now is to get the non-independent group to be very local. They've done research on Utah Lake for years and years and years. They've got loads of institutional knowledge, and they can be the constant source of that for that fully independent group that are super experts in their fields, but not necessarily on Utah Lake. And then we might do a third group that's a little bit more of a mix of those two. So
you guys selected that on Monday?
So on Monday, we ran through 2 exercises where
I was listening in, but I got to go.
Oh, that's fine. It went long as well. So they did 2 kind of ballot type votes from that selected the 23 nominees, and that lent itself well to the selection process. But I think that the third option that we provide, it became apparent that after some discussion, the voters were kind of influenced by that quickly, not in a negative way necessarily, but just, you know, someone mentions this person. Oh, I thought everyone else was going to vote for this person, so I didn't, and it just made sense that they would be a member, and I selected someone else just because I wanted to give them a fair shot too. And then the next round, everyone voted for that person. And so what we'll do as the third group is create a group of well-balanced folks and describe why what their benefits are, so that the group is aware. And there was a possibility that some of the steering committee members didn't have a chance to read all of the bios on all of the nominees, and so they were kind of open for suggestions, and that will allow them to have both those that they voted on originally and a third version with some descriptions to allow them to land on a final group. Does that make sense? So the goal will for sure be to seat that science panel by the next meeting, and then the following meeting will be a meeting with the science panel and the steering committee at the same time, to kind of get both caught up to what each are planning to do moving forward. Carp removal we talked about already, so I won't go to talk to that. We'll turn the time over to any other comments from all of you and or the public.
Is lake coming up a little bit, or?
I haven't seen the latest measure, but I know that our upper basins are very full right now. I imagine that the last that we saw, it was in the 3 foot below range. There's not great snowpack, as we all know. The last few storms have been helpful, but from what I've read, not all that helpful. We'll probably start the summer. We might get into the 2 foot below range, is my guess, and then drop quickly from there if we get a nice warm summer.
Any of the new FEMA maps affecting you in any way? Or?
No, I've attended some of those meetings. They don't really affect the lake. They're looking at the lake. Really, the purpose of those, from what I gather, is determining who can buy flood insurance, who can't, and who's going to pay a fortune for flood insurance. That seems to be it seems like an insurance company hired them to run this test, but that's just from it's not my realm, so.
Yeah, well, the gist of it is that essentially the maps were created before a lot of reservoirs were put in place and before some of the management practices were put in place, so.
But it doesn't seem like that has a huge impact on the way they model their breaks in the levees and things like that.
I've also heard that it's a lot to do with just the technology and mapping, like we have LiDAR data and things that are a lot more accurate, so they were using like 10 foot.
Yeah, so it's basically to say, look at it again and just verify, are these really, where is this elevation really the correct elevation?
Recertifying all the levees and things that aren't supposed to have vegetation, like along any of the rivers.
I guess my concern, again, it's not my forte, but my concern was, as was expressed by others, was that they're planning to use long-term data, even though so much has changed in the short term. So we have new reservoirs, and we have new management practices, and we have varying or changing climate that all will have an impact on what the high water marks are going to be on our lower streams. Yet they are still using 100-year or whatever I forget their parameter, but it was certainly longer than 25 years, which is when we've had our last reservoirs installed. So it's a unique experiment or a unique study that they're having to wrestle with changes to a system and long-term data sets that might not be accurate, but are still helpful because they know what happened historically, although it didn't include some of these changes to the system. So anyway, it's a unique study. I don't.
Yeah, it's trying to model old data and new data all together, and it's going to be complicated.
Very much so. But they seem like they know what they're doing, so hopefully they come to some good middle ground on establishing a careful boundary. Well, we'll adjourn if we don't have anything else. Our next meeting's May 16th at 9:30, likely here again.
I was wondering, did we send anything for Mayor Hatfield when he passed away, as considering he was the chair of our governing board?
We didn't, nor did I know that he passed away.
Oh, he passed away, I think it was a week ago,
Yeah.
week or two? Mayor Hatfield, American Fork, yeah, he passed away. And so I was going to call you and say, did we send anything? Because as cities, we probably, we're all thinking of that, but I didn't know if, as a lake commission, since he had been our governing board chair, if we had sent anything. We might want to still do it.
We do have something for him that we could probably deliver to his wife. How did I miss that?
That was just, it was fairly quick since.
Was it in the
just
paper?
seen him. Yeah, it was in the paper.
Oh,
Yeah, it was fairly quick considering we had just seen him.
and he was a good friend. I feel bad.
Yeah, I missed his funeral. It was because it was during the legislative session and I had some things needs to do there. So I guess it's being a little bit sensible.
Okay.